Hello, everybody. This is the Henderson Real News Show, and I always tell you folks, organize, don't criticize. The human enemies of mankind, their relatives, and their financial supporters. If you do that, I've been telling you for 15 years, when you criticize the human enemies of mankind, they love you. They feel good about you because they know you're not doing anything to hurt them. You're not doing anything for yourself. And that's why I want to tell you that if you want to be independent, if you want to be a real citizen, if you want to have some respect in America and in the world, you have to organize wherever you are in the majority, wherever you are in the majority, on the precinct level, in a city, town, state, or a country. You have to organize and control from birth to death 4 areas of activity, 4 of them. And then you have to do 2 additional things to give yourself real power. First of all, if you want to be considered a citizen anywhere and not an outcast, you have to control your own education and training from birth to death where you're in the majority. You must control your religion, your principles of leadership. You must control your economic development. And you can't depend on the government to do anything for you economically. The less you do for yourself, the less they're going to do for you. And when you start creating economic engines, just going to create some competitiveness with the government, you'll get more. Poor folks don't get anything but the crumbs. And if you have a lot of money, you can buy power. You can own the politicians, the preachers, the corporate leaders. And the next thing you want to do, ladies and gentlemen, is get some of those bad preachers out of office and control the church. Too many of you all, by the millions, are spending thousands and thousands of dollars a year through tithes for these various denominations throughout the world. And you're not even getting any training at all. All they are doing is telling you how to love your enemies and die after you live in hell and then go to heaven. And I teach you that there is a salvation plan, ladies and gentlemen, that you must start using while you're alive. Don't worry about going to heaven. Try to live in heaven on earth. No way in the world you can live in heaven on earth and then die and go to hell. So stop thinking about it. Start doing it. And the last thing you have to understand, once you start controlling your education and training, your economic development, your religion, and leadership positions, now it's time for you to get involved in politics. Because a poor man really don't need to be in politics. You can easily bribe him. It's too easy to bribe poor people when they have these political positions. So you got to learn how to do the old Henderson principle, is where you have to train your own leaders. You have to recruit them, select them, train them, and place them in these institutions that I mentioned. In the education institution, the training schools, which must be the church and community organizations. You cannot depend on the public school to train your people. Listen to me, ladies and gentlemen, you can't depend on them. The public schools throughout America are just going to train 10% of the students. They are basically the so-called honor students. History shows that 90% of the public school students don't do very well in life. 30 to 45, in some places 60% of the students drop out before they finish high school in certain communities. And you know what community I'm talking about. And that's why today, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you that if you get in politics and start controlling your destiny politically, you can pass the laws and you would have your own people trained in positions of responsibility. Not those that are selected by others. Get your own sons, daughters, cousins trained to be in these positions in these areas of activity that I mentioned. And the last thing I want to tell you before I introduce my guests, that you got to organize and stop criticizing the human enemies of mankind, their relatives, and their financial supporters. Always believe it when I tell you. They love you if you just criticize. And now, since I have told you what to expect, I have a genius here today that is doing something that is totally different, and I don't know how he's doing it. I'm going to find out tonight, though. I have a man here that's called the White George. That's his AKA, the White George. And he has a guest with him, and I'm going to introduce this man, and then he is going to introduce his assistant. And then we're going to get into the meat of it. I believe in the meat, not the crumbs. And we're going to talk about the White George and see what he's all about, folks. You need to know it. Every time you look around, you hear black folks talking about integration, segregation, slavery, all kinds of things that happen to me. That's what they say. What happened to me? I want you to know it. That's what they tell you. Today we're going to hear it from another perspective and find out what the White George must be saying. What are you going to say, George? I want you to say that, at least to know, that I'm proud to have you here today. You are a very popular man. I looked at some of your stuff on YouTube and been hearing about you. And I just want you to introduce your guests, and then we're going to get into a few comments and questions and whatever we want to do for the next 30 minutes or so.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you for having us on here. This is the boss. This is my CEO. This is my better half, Anna. Say hi, Anna.
Hello.
Everywhere I go, I wouldn't be here without her.
Well, that's a good thing. You're supposed to have a good mate. You know, Jesus had some good people followed him. They called him disciples, and they were the front men. When they needed something, he would give them directions. Say, go out there and catch a few fish, find some bread, get some money from somebody. Say, we got to eat too, and then move on to the next. So that's what your lady is doing for you, helping you out, taking care of things when you're busy.
She's actually she's my creative director. She sits beside me. You know, I always say that. That's
excellent.
Yep.
So George, I want to tell you right now, since folks don't understand why you want to be called the White George, I want you to tell us where you got that name from. I asked 2 or 3 questions at the same time. Who started calling you White George and why? And then give us a short narrative of your early childhood up to age 10.
All right.
Go ahead, sir.
My name is actually GW, or George Witt, and I reversed that when I created my online media account, Witt George. And people just automatically assumed White George without seeing the E, and it just stuck. And then when people kept saying it, that's why I just made my handles with that. And then you want to know about growing up. I grew up in a small town in Arkansas, middle-class family, truck driver father. And I will tell you, probably the most significant things I remember, especially in regards to now, is at age 7, I received a set of encyclopedias. And there I discovered George Washington Carver because his first initials are GW. And to a 7-year-old who's gone by GW his entire life and never met anyone, that name was so significant to me. That's something I distinctly remember before the age of 10 years old.
Now, how did you get in touch with him? Was the encyclopedia?
Encyclopedia, yes, sir.
That they used to sell door to door.
Yes, sir. I wanted them I was a voracious reader as a kid, and I wanted to see the picture books.
Did you see his picture?
Yes, I did.
Now, how did you read that information? You were born in Arkansas, weren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about your early childhood as far as your parents and grandparents being racist or
Absolutely.
not being racist.
Oh, they absolutely
Because you didn't
were.
supposed to see a black man in an encyclopedia and read about him and then learn to love him as a human being. That's unheard of in Arkansas.
Can I tell you about, well, yes, of course I grew up racist. I mean, it was I would say the ideology of the time, but that was the ideology of my household, my grandparents' household. You know, I was taught racism by people I loved and trusted. And I lived in an echo chamber of that same behavior and thought process and reinforcement. So I didn't know there was another way to think. I wasn't exposed to it. We didn't talk about it in church. We didn't discuss racism. That wasn't a topic. So I didn't know there was another way to think. So absolutely, I grew up knowing the secret handshake. I sat at the table. I know the code. I still know it when I see it. It hasn't changed.
It has not changed. So you're saying you didn't learn anything about equity at home? You went to church. You still were with a bunch of racists and anti-blacks.
Mm-hmm.
And then what about your high school and college time?
I went to a very predominantly white high school. And we had, I think, less than 10 black American students there. And forgive me when I say this, but you know the trope that they were just like the white kids. That was the perspective that was shared back then. And it's ironic, one of the students, he was a year younger than me, his mom was my nurse when I had spinal meningitis, which almost killed me as a teenager. My family adored that family
now,
for obvious reasons.
Was she a real nurse or what we call a black nurse?
Oh, she's a full-fledged.
That took care of white folks.
Full-fledged RN at the hospital.
Now, that's different. So she was a real nurse.
Bachelor's degree in nursing.
Great. That's even better. And the reason I'm saying this, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of white people call black women nurses when they were just the plantation nurse or the black nurse across the street. And when they would have kids, they would suck the kids, will raise the kids, take them to school, cook for them, and love them, sometimes more than the parents. And history shows that a lot of those mammies, they call them mammies during that time, all kind of names. Lucille, Jezebel, all kind of names. Didn't have no first name. And after a while, you find that dynamic changed. So since you were taken care of by this lady, do you know whether she's still alive?
She absolutely is. I'm still friends with her son to this day.
Excellent. Now, that's real good. You headed in the right direction. Now, I want to know what made you the real man. How did you meet your public relations person, your number one assistant over there to your right?
We'll get in trouble for assistant. Actually, we met on the internet. I was an over-the-road truck driver based in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where she was, and we agreed to have dinner. And after about a year of dating, I decided to come off the road and drive a dump truck locally. I mean, it was just about kind of like that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I'm a good girl and plant my roots. I have no kids, no family, so.
Right. So, ma'am, I want you to tell me, when you met this man the first time in person, where you saw what I call the live person, and you had been interacting with him on the internet, what did you think about him before you fell in love with him?
It sounds really crazy, but he's addictive. The knowledge he has, the stories, the lifestyle, the perspective, we can just talk forever and hours, and you can't get enough, or I can't get enough of him.
Well, we're going to have another time then for you to learn more, because we're going to get with him, and he's going to get into some real things now. And I want to share with my audience, White George, what was your extent of dealing with blacks when you were a kid? Did you have playmates, or did you see black people across the track? Did any live close to you, or were you across the track? Were you considered poor, middle class, or upper class when you were a kid up until high school?
Lower middle class. My dad drove like a local trucking company. We were just lower middle class. Like I said, I had those students, other friends that I went to school with. I remember in fourth grade, I had met my first Black American student on the playground playing tetherball. His name was Ronnie. He's from Oakland, California, and he was way smaller than us, and I was terrified of him because he knew how to scare us white boys. It's because he wouldn't get picked on, and his older brother was really huge, Rodney, and him I still talk to just because we went to high school together, but that was my first experience ever. Just as I remember as a kid going into Little Rock to the first time in a swimming pool that had Black American kids in it. And I remember they called soda pop. When it was called them Coke, just 20 minutes away. So I distinctly remember going to see The Wiz, the movie theater, where we're the only white family in there. I don't think we meant to do that.
You probably did.
We didn't, but I remember we enjoyed the movie, and naturally my mom was a little terrified. But she came out, and we were laughing, like we had a great time. But I distinctly remember these accounts. That doesn't mean it wasn't racist as hell. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Now, you tell me one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Here you are looking at a black movie, you say in a theater,
Yes, yes, sir.
and ended up there, what, by accident?
I don't think we realized that was where all the black neighborhood went to the movies. We just saw The Wiz with Michael Jackson, and we wanted to go.
Yeah, during that period when Michael Jackson would get involved in anything, black people going to be there. But usually you didn't find a lot of white Southerners in these black theaters. Now, did you have that segregated theater at that time?
I don't remember anywhere in my lifetime outside of Little Rock ever seeing segregated water fountains or signs for it. But I was born in 71.
Oh, well, I see. Well, you're a young man.
Yes, a little bit.
Yeah,
Still getting
you're a young
older.
man. Right, yeah. Well, I used to see it all the time up until 71. From the 40s, 50s, 60s,
Mm-hmm.
and early 70s. So you have been brainwashed to believe that there's something called equity in America.
Absolutely.
That all people are evenly loved by the government, by the preachers, by the teachers, that they are all going to get a good education if they go to the same school. And at the same time, you've been told that everybody ought to love each other, I would think. I know you weren't raised that way, but how did you get to the point where you are traveling around to black colleges and universities talking to black folks about what? Now, that's the question. Ladies and gentlemen, this man, White George, is traveling around to all the black colleges and universities throughout America. He's well known in social media, and I know he's going to be all there in Asia and Africa and other places soon, talking about black folks and with black folks. Sir, now with all these white places you can go and talk to them about their racist tactics and active. They are active right now, most of them. Now what motivated you to go directly to the source and say, black people, here I am, White George, I got something to tell you. You tell my listeners and viewers what you tell black folks when you go and talk to them at these black colleges and universities.
Black history is American history. The HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, are the crown jewels of the American higher education system, and I stand on that.
You do?
Absolutely. I've seen it with my own eyes.
Okay, now do you know that there's a difference in a black college education and a white college education? Do you know that?
Absolutely. I can identify things I've seen with my own eyes and conversations I have.
Well, share it with us. Talk to my people about it.
All right. The way I see it, this is from my perspective only, and I speak only for myself. I'm a history geek, and as I've studied through histories, I went to a PWI. The University of Arkansas didn't allow black American students until 1948, to let you know. But I love real history. And as I've studied history, I've always had a love for black American history, I think because of the struggle, and I realize the result is more profound because of the struggle involved to do it. And I see these schools and how they got started and the rules that were put on them, land taken away, moved to others. Money's been 15, 16 billion shorted in my lifetime from these schools. I see all this, but they produce such amazing quality graduates. And when I say that, 50% or 75% of lawyers, 50% of judges, engineers, dentists, business owners all come from historically black colleges,
That's
right?
okay.
So we know that. So there's something in there. And then I saw that the GDP of black America since the end of enslavement is about $1.3 trillion. Make it the 17th largest economy in the world inside this country. And that's the fastest anybody's ever done that.
That's right. Now, I want you to tell our viewers and listeners now, if you had that kind of money as a group of people, and right now you can count all the golf courses, black golf courses in America on one hand, you can count all the black colleges that are owned and founded by black people on two hands. Mm-hmm. You can find that black folks are spending 98% of their monies on consumer items. Black people in America don't own one major 5-star hotel outright. You can very seldom find a real black-owned theater. The only big buildings black folks own, and this is not a nothing but a fact. Big churches. Big churches. We don't control anything of any significance in the 5 areas that I mentioned. In education and training, economic development,
Healthcare.
religion, healthcare for sure. Now, do you believe in integration?
Absolutely. I think we suck without it, to be honest. If we're all a big salad bowl here in this country, and people in my community are the lettuce, we're the bulk of it, right? And this is the simplest way I can break it down. We can't, let me back that up. There's a white state senator who's about 75 years old for the Tennessee State, of the Education Committee. He was talking to Dr. Glenda Govler with Tennessee State. And he was baffled about how she's getting so many students to want to go to Tennessee State. And he asked her, is it just really good marketing? Not is it a quality education? Is it faculty-student ratio? Your lower tuition? It wasn't about any of that stuff. It was from an area of superiority. She got irritated.
And I want you to give me your version of that. Then I'm going to give you mine. I'm familiar with what he's talking about. Dr. Glover.
Dr. Glover, yes, sir.
She was here at Jackson State University for years as a top administrator. So we're going to get back to you. How did you feel about that since you were so agitated when you saw that?
I saw that, and it just sounded like entitlement right off the top, the way he explained it, and asking, well, why are they choosing your schools over ours, or predominantly white schools? I mean, it's in the pudding. It's right there. They have the education available. The institutions are amazing, but I don't understand how he can actually get away with asking that question.
Well, I saw it. He didn't get away with it with me and a lot of other folks. That guy was saying, that old senator was saying, here you are, Dr. Clover, at this university that we've been underfunding for years. Matter of fact, we've been trying to get you to get out of education and integrate with us so we can give you a real miseducation. And you surviving on pennies, and you're producing some great students in all areas of activity. Why they are wasting your time and my time and our money with you when we want you to go out of business? Why are they not with us? That's my interpretation of what he was telling her, that your school is insignificant. You're not worthy. And I don't want to give you any more money. You just go and tell your folks to come on to my school.
Can I give you the white boy version of that?
Please. That's my next question.
And this is where I think diversity, why I say it's crucial for all the people who think it's not. That old fart, and I don't have much respect because of the way he spoke to her, but he sits there a mile from Tennessee State's campus, and I've asked all kinds of administration there at the school, has he ever visited? And they said no. He controls the purse string for a school. He's not willing to go a mile to walk around and see for himself. That lack of diversity, that old boy, that's what I'm talking about. With that up there, it doesn't change. If there's no one there that looks like is a representative of the school, they're not going to get a fair shake. It just doesn't happen. And now we want to do everything in reverse with knee-jerk because we didn't invest in diversity in the beginning, and now look where we are. And white people are uncomfortable with both sides of it.
Okay, now, here's something else that we must address, and it's just a spin-off to what you just said. Now, you know this man you talked about and a lot of his peers actually plan for these universities and colleges to go out of business. They said, we're going to let them go out because of lack of funds. We're going to make sure they can't survive economically. And every time they misfund these black colleges and universities, those presidents and deans and vice presidents go and find money through donors, grants, all kinds of fundraising activity, and then survive and put their students in positions where they become doctors and lawyers and go to those schools, black schools, and take the same test and pass it, the medical test, the legal test, the law test, get licensed with a miseducation that's planned. Now, ma'am, what does that tell you about a black student that's been cheated from kindergarten through college and university, and he or she is still able to get that miseducation and still make it in this racist society where your folks said, "We're going to destroy you with a smile." Can you address that?
Tell me where your kids go to school, what you chose for them.
Just a little
Yeah.
side note on me.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a small school, an all-white school, country girl. And when I got married and had children, I knew I wanted to send them to a bigger school, more opportunities
Right.
than what I did. My children are minorities in the system.
I mean, what kind of minorities?
Honey, what are the percentages? Is it 32
Just
and 25?
being white, it's has several. I don't know how many countries. 73 countries are represented in
Right.
global studies.
It's their global
Okay.
studies
But
school.
it's,
I got
it is a predominantly minority white school, what it said, but they go for the arts.
Right.
But her reasoning is because she wanted to be exposed to so much more than they would be by just friends who look like them. Music, because her kids are all talented musically. She just had a completely different mindset than I would have ever considered for kids, and I have none.
Okay.
And
Go
the,
ahead.
And the question you asked me and explained to me, that's even hard for me to fathom, that type of mindset, if that makes any sense.
It makes sense.
Because there's so many things, like in the South, that he's told me, and I've heard all these experiences from traveling, that I didn't experience the racism up north.
Didn't hear
In
about it.
Indiana, as much and as severe, obviously, as down here in the South.
But let me tell you,
Even
man,
now.
you were shielded from that. Matter of fact, there were a lot of black folks in your state, in your city, if you were in a large city, but they were across the track. They were not to be seen or heard, and they were forced to stay there. And if they moved into the white arena, they were there to be a servant to some of you all. That's the way it was in the South. And basically, it's the same way today. It's very difficult for a black person, one with economic means, to get in that real upgraded, gated community. He has to be a millionaire to do that. And as long as no more than 5 get in there, white folks will accept that person. But if 6 get in there, somebody got to go. They start selling their home next door to the blacks. I've seen it happen all over America. I've lived in a lot of states.
It's history. I
And
mean,
you see these so-called non-racists that pretend they believe in being equal to all, always set their mind back to their early training. If I'm wrong, sir, just tell me right now.
No. I will tell you those are
tell me
straight,
right
up,
now.
straight up some things you said. For one, the type of racism I grew up with is I could have 5 cars on blocks in the yard and 10 dogs running around. I hadn't mowed the grass. But as soon as a black family move in, I'd be blaming them for my low property value.
That's right.
You know, that's the mindset. That's the easiest and
Exactly.
simplest way not
Way
to
to
be,
explain it.
to explain.
That's right.
Correct. Now, as to, like you said, the so-called non-racist, that is a category of people I don't know how to define. Because I think racists are absolutely committed to being racist, and you're going to waste energy trying to get through to them. You just got to minimize them, move them out of the way. Okay.
All right.
First off, second, I see so much when people say I don't see color, which just blows my mind because I probably have said that before, but blows my mind. And that's one of the things I try to educate people that look like me and white people is that to not see color is absolutely disrespectful to a person's heritage. It's just not a measurement of the quality of who they are. Like Dr. King said, it's simple. But we have to change the measuring thing. But when I think they do harm by being tone deaf. And that's what I see a lot in that mid-gap, hardcore racist, least, if we had to have a talent gap in there, I think a lot of it's tone deaf and just basic ignorance without a desire to want to know.
Okay, now tell me this. Now, my listeners and viewers want to know. Now, you're going to these black colleges and universities talking about black history. How are you accepted in your white community organization, your white churches, your white schools? And if you are, do you talk about the same thing, black history, black culture? Are you afraid to do it? Are you acceptable to the fact that you might be rejected? And tell us your real experience when you go and start talking to them white boys and girls that been raised differently, that believe that certain people don't have a right to be a citizen, don't have a right to vote, don't have a right to a good job,
Oh, I have those friends.
on and on. How do you deal with those folks, and what do you tell them?
Well, it's funny you ask. I get death threats. I've been called a white savior, and I'm like, well, of course I'm white, and I saved my own butt. So by definition, I'm my own white savior. If you look at it that way, I get called all kinds of things, and that's the low end of the spectrum. But I've had conversations. I've had a couple of friends that don't speak to me anymore because they said some things that offended me personally. One was, are they not smart enough to go to white schools? And I did everything but talk about his mom and hung up on him. And he called me back, and I knew I got into his head a little bit, but he wasn't somebody I wanted to talk to much beyond it. I've had grown men call me and want to discuss their own racism with me. Like, how did I get around it? Because they don't know how to get out of that negative loop. I've had strangers do the same thing, probably 30 or 40 men. But most of the time, the reaction I get from white guys especially, they love the history. Dude, I didn't know that. When I talk about Jesse Eugene Russell, Digital Wireless Networks, our cell phones will be paperweights to this day with that way he did for AT&T. They go, their face is like, wow. Like, they're creative or they're technical, and they appreciate a fact they didn't know, they were never taught. AT&T's never promoted as far, that I've seen. So they didn't know that this existed.
Now, tell me this then. Since your white friends don't know a lot about black folks, I want both of you all to talk about the fact that you all made history in America from 1557 up to today. Mostly, you excluded what blacks did, what contribution they made. And now, since we have this so-called equal education, you heard me say so-called, you all don't even want to know your real history. Your politicians don't want it taught in the schools. Your church people don't want it taught in the church. Now, I'm asking, what is your position then on this so-called critical race theory? Now, that talks about the real history of America. And I want both of you all's comments on that. What do you think about critical race theory? And to you, what does that mean? What is critical race theory as you all see it?
Well, this is my area, so I'm going to take this.
Okay.
I'll just, for one, let me just tell you, white people don't like, or certain words aren't palatable to them, right? No matter how you say it, right? Let's go with critical race theory. If you say that, white people shut down. So that's why I don't call it that. I just call it real American history. Sorry. And when I take that off of it, then they start kind of listening. So I change the perspective. Do I think critical race theory as it's defined is important? It's absolutely crucial. It's absolutely crucial. I've learned more about my race, my own skin color, which doesn't mean anything to me because it's never been held against me. But I've learned more about stepping outside of my own community, about what my community is like by seeing it through the eyes and the stories of others. And that helped gave me perspective. But when it comes to the necessity of it, for one, you've got students in this country that can see men and women that look just like them. And what he can do it or she can do it, I can do it. Just that visual connection is one. Just the community history and the cultural history in the Black American community is crucial. But I think if more kids that look like me knew this, honest to God, I believe they'd be fascinated. Like it starts to change things.
Well, let me tell you what I know from research and from talking to some of the white folks that I've talked to for years about this thing. And I want to hear your version again. Why you don't want your children to know about systemic and institutional racism that's been going on ever since they founded this country. Is it because you all are embarrassed the way you treated black folks, Indians, the Chinese, the Japanese, the early Jews, the early Italians that moved here to America?
Irish.
Is that the reason why they don't want to teach it?
Oh, it's uncomfortable. It's extremely uncomfortable. And it distorts people. And I'm speaking again for myself, but I think I can speak to a chunk of people. It distorts everything we knew about our own history, right? I mean, it distorts how we see ourselves, how patriotic and we're saviors. And it's not that way at all.
That's right. Who did you save other than yourself?
Exactly. Who do we sacrifice to enrich ourselves?
That's right.
That's the God's honest truth, but it's not comfortable. And people need to learn to be comfortable with discomfort. And I see that. That's why I enjoy it. Dialogue, but a lot of people don't. sometimes I feel the only way is to have those conversations and then tell people about them, like vicariously.
Well, that's your job. Your job, sir, and you're running around to the black colleges and universities, which is a great thing. But every time you go to a black college or university, the next time you ought to go to a white college or university and talk about the same thing and see how soon it'll be before you get run out of town or threaten you again, or they might actually come and hang you on the spot. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I really don't have any fear of that.
You don't have any fear.
No, for two reasons. One, I've never really had to fear for things being white. And second, man, when it's my time to go, it's my time to go. I survived years in prison. I just don't fear things like that. That doesn't distract me.
How did you get along with black folks in prison? How did you get along with them? Just tell the truth now.
My first cellmate, actually, really, really well. I did have the only fights I had, though, was usually over bull crap. But no, my first cellmate was a name named Larry. I wish I could remember his last name. Begins with a W. 2 weeks. And I remember we were locked down 23-1. And he goes, man, are you racist? And I'm like, yeah, pretty much. And he goes, can I ask you some questions? Sure. And I let him just tee off and ask me everything he's ever wanted to know that was somebody that would be honest. I said, now can I ask you questions? And then for that 2 weeks, we talked and we talked and we talked. And I grew up 20 minutes away from Larry, and he might as well have grown up on Mars, and I grew up on Earth.
You didn't know each other.
We didn't know each other.
You didn't see each other.
Nope.
You didn't interact with each other.
Didn't know existed.
At school, at church, in the community. So that's...
You know where I met him was in prison.
In prison.
Where he taught me a lot. That's probably those defining conversations I'll always remember because of just how it flipped the narrative. But it's not an instant light bulb. It's a slow. It takes a while to instill it. It takes a long time to learn it or how to undo it. But I also did a lot of legal work and wrote letters for gentlemen who can't read or write in prison. And they didn't have any money and they couldn't buy the debt.
Right,
so if I need to pay it for them, I'd do it myself. And because I read so much, a lot of guys would ask me, what am I reading? And I knew a lot of Black American history already, but I would go read books on purpose so I could just tell them the story in an engaging way. And they, plus I was 40 years old when I went in. I'm a huge dude. People left me alone.
Bet they did.
But you sit on my rack because they want to know. We also in my barracks had a guy that wrote a handwritten motion to the United States Supreme Court and beat the Arkansas Department of Correction 9-0. Waxed him over growing his hair and his beard out. He's a white Muslim. And he got the U.S. Supreme Court to force Arkansas to let him grow his hair and beard out. So I had some really crazy, cool experiences with people. The closest lifers I were to were older black gentlemen. And I can't always say all of them were fairly convicted. They knew their cases, they accepted their fate, but they got with youngsters. And I learned so much about how life works from them gentlemen. But they also pulled me aside. I think they saw something or it was worth their time to spend talking to me. So, God has a funny way of putting people in our lives.
That's right. Now, with all of that, you have had the positive and the negative when you've been dealing with individuals. You started working with blacks in a serious manner when you were 40. And that sort of gave you an idea to do what you're doing today, or that didn't happen right then. You just got out of prison and you had to do something. And you say, well, I'm going to go and help poor black folks.
No, it wasn't like that at all, actually.
That way? Tell us how it was then.
First off, I had to deal with the guilt thing. That white guilt, that's a real thing. And I couldn't do it from a place of that. I'm just not a person driven by guilt. I'm just aware of it. But it wasn't until I forgave myself and then I could ask for forgiveness did I realize my path and purpose was different. And I started telling Black American history stories on TikTok just because I loved them. The first one's John H. Johnson from my home state. And it went viral. And people said, tell more. And I knew more. And HBCUs were the common theme of so many of these great Americans.
Right.
And I did a series on a story that went really viral. And I looked at her Memorial Day weekend last year and said, you want to go see some campuses? And off we took to Central State, Wilberforce, Kentucky State, and Simmons College of Kentucky. Right. School was out of session. But I had studied so much about it and walked the campuses, I felt that energy. And it was just a way I knew I could tell people to show respect for the university. And the people who watch me that look like me maybe can start to see a different perspective.
Let me suggest something here. Since you are here in Mississippi, I know you're going to be leaving real soon. Ladies and gentlemen, White George will be leaving this week, going to other places. And we want you people that are looking and listening to this show from Jackson State University, Tougaloo, Hines Community College, and some of the other colleges in this area to invite this man when he comes back to come over and talk to your students. You have the ability to get the new word. He is one of the few white folks that I've met recently that says that he feels that some white people might feel guilty about some things. And Sarah, we didn't get into it. I told you my follow-up question is always going to be stimulated from what you said. What are you white folks guilty of? What do you feel guilty about?
Well, you have to be aware first to be guilty. Think about that. If you're not aware of it and you're ignorant to it and you won't educate or open your mind to it, you can't feel guilt, right? It's a self-defense mechanism, I think, psychologically for people, because it's a lot. It's. We went down to Montgomery, and I got on Sunday morning to go pray, and it was a beautiful morning. That's when I realized that's where the brawl happened. And in prison, I learned you could feel pain and anger and hurt, and you can feel these things that I never could before. And I don't know if that's empathy or what, but my mind was really clear, and I just felt this weight and pull tugging on me. And I started to realize the tunnel I'd walked through is where enslaved Africans were marched up to the warehouse that was 2 doors down from my hotel, which is now a bar district. And I realized where I'm sitting on the docks, there are enslaved African Americans that came in that are in that riverbed still. And she came to the tunnel once. She couldn't go back. She was tearing up. She felt it.
I wasn't tearing up.
Right.
I wasn't tearing up. I was
Just
breaking down.
breaking down.
Because you could feel
Right.
something different, right?
Mhm.
It was awful.
But if you've never known that you could feel this or knew, I don't know if I'm verbalizing this to you correctly, but it affected me in a way because I could see, like, from history come alive before my eyes, and I could imagine what happened, and it's extremely overwhelming, and it's not comfortable for a lot of people. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying I think people avoid that because come to terms with it's not easy.
Well, you might be right. And since you're talking it from experience, we have to hear what you say, believe what you say. But now, do you think some of your folks ought to be guilty about all the people they killed through their friends called the Ku Klux Klan, the other hatchet people that burned down
Sure.
churches during your time in your city?
Absolutely.
What about all this police brutality that's been taking place in the black areas? What about all these black gang bangers killing each other? What impact is that having on your psychology? What about the black church that has more money than the state of Mississippi, and they are not doing very much training? The members are not getting very much training at all other than Sunday school. And they have some of the smartest professors in these white churches, lawyers, doctors, nurses, anything you name, and they won't use those people to teach their kids anything. 90% of the black churches in America don't even have a training program other than Sunday school, and that's a very small segment of the population. Mm-hmm. And as the days pass and weeks, they're getting fewer and fewer of young people under 18 in these churches. So as you see it with your training and interaction with black folks, where you think the black folks are headed in America? Economically, politically, socially, religiously, and in leadership positions.
Well, I can only tell you from a white perspective.
That's what I want.
I don't spare comment or opinion on black matters like that because I'm not in it. But from my position, I think that the economic might of black America is going to continue to grow at a mind-blowing rate. Like I said, the curve is like this, for one. I don't think if white America prepares to accept this economic power that's coming, some of people are going to get crushed by it. And a lot of us are going to kind of look like told you so. I think that's coming. Politically, we need more diversity in this country. Because you look at how it's running, as I start to see our real history, the way things have unfolded, racism and Jim Crow and segregation, and how much worse or more extensive than I actually knew it was, this is from white-dominated politics, too. I'm not just trying to say white, but we've done enough bad. You know what I mean? Because we've tried to hold on till it looks like us, it must be good. And I don't know if a knee-jerk reaction is best, but I believe in diversity, that I believe real talent needs to be recognized, that we can get them elected. It's not picking somebody out for the color of his skin. It's just there's real talent voices that don't get heard.
Well, don't you think it's more about power? A lot of your
sure.
folks know that black people have the ability to be great leaders, but they don't want to do two things. They don't want to put black politicians, black preachers, and black corporate leaders in positions where they can control the budget, where they can control the contracts, and where they can create a job and put someone in that's actually going to do something that's going to look out for the welfare of all the people. That's what people are doing, to maintaining their power base,
Checking boxes.
Right.
keeping folks from doing what they're supposed to do as a citizen, and it's going to cause some major problems in America during the next 50 years. Ma'am, what would you like to add to that?
I was just agreeing with you. I was just agreeing with you on that whole point. Things need to be more equal. They need to flip that around for sure, and it needs to be prominent. We need to take care of it. We can't be waiting around for it.
You can't be waiting. So you think the blacks ought to be more assertive in those areas that we have mentioned?
No, I think we need
I
to
think
be.
white people need to be more assertive in these areas.
Yeah, I don't think it comes down to the black American community needs to do more. I don't think that's it at all. I think white America has to realize we picked the fight. Whether we were alive or not at the time,
Right.
we still picked the fight, and we continue to pick a fight, and we don't like the fight that's coming back to us, and we'll do anything we can to avoid getting punched in the mouth. It's that simple.
All right. Now, suppose you then say, well, black folks are in a bad position politically is because they are aligning themselves with the same political party. You know, most black folks in America are Democrats. Do you think there should be an insurgence of more blacks into other parties? Would that be acceptable to you?
I don't know what you call insurgents. No, I just think that, again, voices that are powerful and necessary and good voices are not being heard. They're being squashed and crushed. So I think people are trying to win this top down, and I think we got to be more bottom up. When I say white people need to be more assertive, right? We pick this fight, and we don't want to get punched in the mouth that's coming. We need to do something about it just from a self-preservation sense. So understand what I'm saying. But again, yes, there needs to be a lot more diversity in politics. So some of the content creators I follow are educators. Most are black, and they're fantastic. I love how they teach. It wasn't how I was taught. So I started to explore, she and I both do, how education is taught, like especially home education. I'm fascinated because these kids are getting such excellent educations.
When and where?
Well, at homes, the way they're doing the schools, at the schools, I'm just seeing the way black educators do it, especially black women. And I love the guy. I've been friends with guys, but I love the way the women teach. It's no nonsense. It's a different way than the very sterile environment I grew up in, and I'm fascinated by it. I'm engaged by it because I'm like a 6-year-old boy in my head. I have a zest for life. So that's got to be the same for other people, doesn't it?
It should.
So yeah, that's. Yeah, she says you want to flip it, but how do you flip it? You can't meet it head on. You got to come sideways at it, or people won't listen.
Okay, well, I want you to address these words here in your own words. Black lives historically don't matter.
Well, they haven't for a long time in America. Yeah, they have not.
Why they don't matter?
Again, like you said, once you had enslavement and Jim Crow became the new form of slavery, you still had to dehumanize black Americans.
A white life has more quality than a black life. How you
Says
address
who?
that?
Says who? Not my world.
Not your word?
No.
You weren't taught that?
No.
You didn't see examples of that during your early childhood?
Sure, but that's not how I think, though.
Oh, not the way you
I mean, not the way I think, but do I know people that think that way? Sure, absolutely.
All right. Now
Yeah.
let's say this then. I want you to address both of you can do it if you want. White people don't owe blacks anything, or do they?
I'll take it.
Okay,
Let me
take
have it.
Okay.
For one, reparations is a dirty word to white people. Let's address that right off the bat. People, if you want to market that better, change the word. Call it investment, something white people understand. For one, and when people say, "I didn't live back then," right? I didn't live during enslavement. You didn't live during slavery, right? But you know who did? People who came before me in my family.
That's right. I was going to say it.
People who came before me in my family who benefited,
grandparents,
who directly
They
benefited.
got the land. They got the
Tax
education.
money for our
tax money for their schools.
yeah.
And a good example, if you would get $5 per student in your school during the time when you started, the black folks would get 5 cents per student.
Mm-hmm.
You would build a high school and you would have a lab with all kind of equipment. Black school, brand new, would have 1 microscope. And the teacher would let the students use it. At my school, we had one way up on a shelf. You had to get a ladder to get it. And you only got it down, and the teacher would use it. And we would stand around that thing and try to look at it. And he'd put it back up there. We couldn't touch it.
For fear of anybody breaking it, couldn't get another one.
That's right.
Yeah.
You knew we were going to get another one. It just wasn't going to happen. Now, that happened in all areas. For instance, they created a typing program at my high school. They put 5 typewriters in the typing class for 35 students. The first class was 35 students with 5 typewriters.
Bet you all became good typists, though, didn't you?
No.
Did you not?
Hell no, we couldn't.
Oh, well, I'm not being that. I'm just saying because a lot of people learn. I'm not saying it's wrong to say it. Just don't get that twisted that it benefits. But I've had a lot of people who do with less.
Well, those few that had a chance to get in the class,
yeah.
oh hell, they had 56 and 7 words.
That's what I'm saying.
We
Yeah.
had one or two students type 75 and 80 words. And didn't even have one at home, just learned that at school. So imagine now if you had one, at least 30 in the class, 10 or 15 or 30 microscopes, and mathematics department, old books, few books, no books. I'm talking about the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, up to today. Many of these public schools don't have enough books for the students to use. The students and the teachers have to spend their own money, especially the teachers, to subsidize the lack of equipment and materials in the schools even today.
I'll go you one better. Driving a dump truck in 2023, I'm going around a very nice high school in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's getting a $160 million upgrade to a beautiful campus. But the inner city elementary school that I've been working at all spring and summer, because I think it's 25 years in the making, they're moving out of the temporary school they built and made permanent into their $17 or $18 million elementary.
Who is moving out of that?
Though the elementary school that's been right there in the inner city that has been just, nothing's ever been done for it. After a quarter century, they finally agreed to put a new elementary in. But this high school is getting a $160 million upgrade.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, it's going on at the same time, just a few miles apart.
Right. Now tell me this. I bet they're getting ready to do something that a lot of people don't want to hear about. I bet they are getting ready to gentrify that black area if they improve in the school. What do you think?
No, not there. No, I think it's
not
been
doing
political pressure to finally get the school built. No, not there. No.
Not there.
No, it's there's a lot of what's Burmese, I think, over there by the elementary school. We have a big Burmese population that came in through crises, and no, I don't think they're gentrifying.
Yeah, now they're in business. They are going to school there. They are speaking a lot of English.
But that's not an area. I do see the gentrification. I do see what occurs, but that actual area, no. I think
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, progress for what it's worth.
All right, let's look at the other word or two I want you all to address. So you just jump in anytime you want, ma'am. If you don't want to, that's fine. 'Cause
Sometimes I
know
don't
you-
get very many words in, if you can tell.
Okay, I got you. Now, here's something else I want you to address. Black women are strong. What does that mean to you?
I did a video. She'll agree, and she'll even comment on this. I did a video called "I Love" or "Mad Black Women," and they did really well. But I was just in prison. I learned about the strength of a black woman. I learned about the core unit in the Black American home, if there's a father or no father. I learned the different dynamics. I learned how strong it is. I learned that some of my guys in prison, they'll hurt anybody, but their mama, I saw a different respect, and it was like. What they did to hustle's one thing, but when it came to their mama, they stepped correctly.
That's right.
And I started to see the respect of the grandmothers and the aunties, but I began to understand better language I didn't understand, things they say, their intent. It opened up a new world to me. I love mad black women, a strong black woman. Love them. They're the best huggers in the world. They're the toughest on me, but the more transparent I am, the more merciful and gracious and kind they are to me. That's what I believe about a strong black woman.
Now let's look at the other side. Why do you think the black men in prison and the others you've met during your lifetime didn't say anything about their wonderful dads. Every one of them had a dad. If you have a good, strong mother and a good, strong grandmother, you have a dad somewhere. Why do you think they didn't talk about him?
Most of the guys I met, two things I saw in prison was lack of education, lack of a father, from their words. A lot of them just, they carry a lot of weight. They didn't have a dad around or a father figure. So I don't know. That's things that I've been told by experience, but it's hard for me to. I had a fantastic dad, so I don't know any other way.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, you hear this? Now, the White George, now that's his AKA. I'm not making fun of this man. He calls himself, you heard him say in the introduction why he's called the White George, saying that one of the problems you have with black folks is that they don't have enough fathers, especially those that are getting in trouble. Now, black folks that's listening to this, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to continue to populate our black communities without a father around, whether you love him or not? Are you going to marry your child's daddy? Are you going to depend on him to support that child, whether you marry him or not? Are you going to turn him into authorities, social service agencies, and make sure that he pays to help keep your child out of prison, out of jail, out of a school that's not going to teach anything but miseducation? These are just questions I'm asking you. Talk among yourselves first, in your churches, in your community organizations. Get with your students in class, in these inner city schools. They're not going to let you do it in these other schools. And talk about the importance of having a father in the house. And see what your young people will say. Ask them, do you know your father? Do you have a male role model in your home, in your church, in your community, someone you can go and talk to? Talk to your sons and daughters and ask them these questions. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll be surprised. Ask your son or daughter, am I a responsible parent? Do I work too much just to survive and feed you? When I send you to grandmother and great-grandmother, are you learning anything? You have an iPhone with all the websites on it where you can learn academics, politics, STEM programs, foreign languages. As a parent, am I making sure that you are using that iPhone versus looking at games and listening to rap and trying to learn how to sing and dance? Am I responsible as a parent, even though I don't have a father in the house? Son and daughter, do I take you all to church? Do I send you to church? Son and daughter, when you make poor grades in school, do I use my resources and get you a tutor? Ask yourself that. Ask your child that. And when you ask, they will give you an answer. And if they say, ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about parents now, males and females, if they say, Mom and Dad, I do have a weakness here and there, that I do need some help, get them some tutoring. Set up some discipline in your home. There's no reason for you to allow your sons and daughters to not have a curfew, not have a study period in the home. There's no reason why you shouldn't demand that your children will do their homework and bring it to you every night before you go to bed. Even if you have a good third-grade education, don't even understand what it is, demand that they do that homework and bring it to you, and you look at it and do like my dad used to do, and Mom. They say, that looks good, boy. Say, you sure that's right? I would say, yes, sir. That's exactly what the teacher told me to do. I didn't know any better. And they'd say, well, go back and look at it again. I don't believe this is right. But they would never tell me what was wrong. And later on, I found out they didn't know what was wrong. All right. 5th grade education and a 3rd grade education in the household at that time. Folks, if you work with your children, you'll be surprised what they will learn and what they will do And with all the odds that's stacked against your kids or your children, if you would do the simple things that I just mentioned, you'll keep them out of jail. They will finish high school with a diploma. You'll be surprised. They will leave with some kind of certification where they can get a job that will make a livable wage and not the minimum wage or less. And then they will be in a position where they will learn that they must be competitive in the society, and they will start creating businesses. They can help themselves, help their children. All of them not going to be a football star or basketball star. Parents, don't you want to raise your children better so when you get 50 and 60 and 70, you won't have to be working 2 jobs as you've been doing the first 50 or 60 years of your life. Your child then will be able to buy you a home, pay for it cash, get you out of the ghetto, get you out of that old folks' home. That's what we are learning today. So, White George, I want to ask you one more thing here. Our time is about gone. What about institutional racism? We hit it a little bit. Now, some people say, and I read this many times throughout the years, that all the American institutions on the local, state, federal, and international levels been practicing institutional racism since the colonial period, and I want you to tell me how wrong I am so I can apologize to you for saying it.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you that you were wrong. I absolutely agree. I think it goes on to this very day. I mean, you're going to find an argument from me. I mean, I could prove to you how it still exists.
Let's do it.
Let's say somebody's self-employed, and this is more of a systemic, I think, than institutional, but I'll go to that. Somebody sees Shanika or Javante on an application, and they're like, oh, nope, trash. They're going to make a stereotype associated with that name right off the bat. Now, that's biased, that's prejudicial, it's a whole lot of things. That still happens today. I've known people who do that recently.
Hold on a second. Ladies and gentlemen, you just heard the White George say, your name, the name you give your child can keep him or her from getting a job. Now, if a black person said it, you wouldn't believe it. Now, I'm going to get on this limb and be criticized, and I'm telling you now, black folks, stop naming your kids all those funny names that's going to keep them unemployed. Now, you probably say, well, he has no right to tell me this. I do have a right to say it, but you do what you want to do. If you want to call them Shemika and Shanika and Libbopip or whatever you want to call them, you do that. But you heard the White George say that there's a lot of racism in employment, and it starts with the application. Mm-hmm. I hate to tell you this because I know you already know it. But start thinking about naming your children something else other than all these so-called traditional names, cultural names. But if you want to keep the status quo, continue to do what you're doing.
Let me speak to one thing.
Go ahead, sir.
I love beautiful names, so I'll be clear about that. I'd like to change perspectives of how these employers perceive names. That's what I would like, because I've talked to too many people who wish they would have named their kids what they wanted to, and I don't think there should be a restriction. But I understand exactly what you're saying. To get by, to get through the system, you almost have to play a game you're forced to. So
That's right.
I'm in agreement with you there.
Now, you see, folks, I told you what I supposed to tell you. Now, the White George here supposed to tell his white peers the same thing I told you. Stop being so racist. And if you look at an application and the child is called Benita Williams that went to a so-called black school, they automatically code it and put on a file that's called the safe file. They put it in a safe, and in 6 months they throw it in the garbage can. A lot of you don't believe me, but if White George says it, you'll believe it. So you're saying this happens in employment.
Absolutely, it does.
What about for the so-called black people that have all these master's degrees and they want to get in the management training programs?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have the same problem, do you think?
I can't say this for sure factually, but I wish somebody would look it up for me. She and I both agree. We think black American women are the most educated segment of society. I spoke to too many that said when a job requires a master's degree, they know that's for a white person. They go get a doctorate. Or if it requires a PhD, they got an extra master's or another doctorate behind it.
And some postgraduate training on top of that. You're exactly right. Now, you all hear the white George saying this. I'm not saying it. You know it. Black women are some of the smartest people around. They are overeducated. But at the same time, they can get a job that his friend can get. The same job. She will have a high school education, and they will have a master's degree. She will be interviewed and probably get the job and get more money than the person, because they got to have a few blacks in this company, get more money than the person with a master's degree, or at least the same.
But they teach us not to talk about our pay among each other, right?
That's why.
Which the Supreme Court has ruled is illegal. An employer cannot restrict you from talking about your pay. So think about how it's just indoctrinated. You can't talk about it. You lose your job. They don't want them to know.
Of course they don't want to know. And then you go to personnel, and they've been told if you tell anybody what we're paying you up, we're going to fire you.
If they do, call a lawyer. I'll just tell you right now.
That's right. So personnel people are the most ineffective employees. They are nothing but paper pushers, and I would say it. They make no decisions. And all they do, ladies and gentlemen, a personnel person from the vice president of personnel on down makes no decisions. They get all the applications, put the top 3 or 5 in a packet and put it in a folder and send it to the white George, and he will decide by looking at the names and the schools they attended and select the person. And then he'll pull out his affirmative action sheet, which he doesn't have to do anymore, and see how many black folks he has in that department, how many Indians, how many Mexicans, and make sure that he's going to hire a colored person. In many cases now, these colors are the other colors, not the black colors. That's why you don't find a lot of black folks now in these hotels, cleaning up, driving the buses, working for the city, cutting grass, picking up garbage. It's the other colors. And as I tell you, black folks, you're headed to destruction in America. You're losing your status. And if you don't start organizing, pooling your resources, training your own leaders, putting them in areas of responsibility where you're in a majority, and dominate from birth to death, and then save your resources so you can train your folks for 3 generations, or get ready to be put in a relocation camp. You know, I've been telling you this, folks. America has 109 relocation camps in the 50 states already furnished, ready for you. And it's not going to be the Hispanics and others that's coming to America by the thousands every day. They're going to have your schools, your communities, and you're going to be put in a relocation camp, which I call the urban ghetto and the rural ghetto. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to be one way in and one way out. Now, most of you don't believe me because when you hear the truth, you start criticizing the person that's telling you the truth. And then when you start talking about solutions, which I give you all the time, pool your resources, select your own people, train them, and then put them in positions of responsibilities in education and training institutions, churches, which we call religion, in other leadership positions with community organizations, and then get them involved in politics, and not just to be a policymaker, they want to stop taking orders and then become a policy makers. Right now, the average black leader in America is an order taker, not a policy maker. We need policy makers, folks. And if you believe that integration is the thing that's going to save you, I'm going to tell you right now that's not going to save you. Integration has to be the worst thing that happened to black folks in America since slavery. Now, you don't believe me because some of you like to keep your head in the sand and you say there's no such thing that I need special rights because I deserve them. I don't want to be called a black person. I don't want to be called a minority. I want to be a diverse person. I want everybody to have what I want. You don't want everybody to have what you want and what you need. You're already 50 miles behind in all the areas that I talk about. So you can't start on an even field and win the race. That's why I'm going to conclude by saying you must pool your resources. You must recruit, train, select, and place your own leaders in 5 areas of activity. And as I conclude this show, I'm going to get a final word to my guests, and I most certainly appreciate them coming because it is the real, the White George, the White George. So you have the floor. Give us your contact information and anything else you want to tell us. And ask yourself, do I want to go and talk to those folks at Jackson State, at Tougaloo, and some of the other colleges? Ask yourself that, and I'll give you the answer. Go ahead, talk.
Absolutely, I would love that honor. You can find me on TikTok at White George, and Instagram is The Wit George, white without the E, The Wit George. Like I said, I'll do Black American History this next month because I'm not for Black History Month. I believe it should be told all year. I'm going to do Black History, the White People edition for Black History Month.
Excellent.
So the good and the bad as it relates to Black American history. Mm-hmm. From civil rights icons to Bull Connor, and Governor Faubus on the evil side of the spectrum.
Oh, you're going to talk about your white governors and your white legislators, your white preachers, and how they practice racism in these churches, man. Black folks couldn't go to the church. Hispanics couldn't go unless they were a white Hispanic. You're going to talk about that?
During Black History Month, no less, yeah. It's part of American history, needs to be told. And what better way to frame it except when people who look like me are paying attention to Black history for a month? Mm-hmm. Why not give them real history in there? It's the only way I know how to do it.
Do you have a lot of white viewers on your TikTok place?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're nothing but an educator then. So you need to keep going, keep talking, keep walking your walk. And I'm going to tell you, the more effective you become, the harder it's going to be for you to be loved. Now, let's hear a concluding statement by Miss Anna.
I will say that we dated for a year before he even put anything out on TikTok or anything. And when he said, babe, you want to go look at a school? And I'm like, sure. But before that happened, I dated him for a year, and I've heard a lot of these history stories that he has told his whole life. But he just started doing it in front of a camera.
A lot of these I've known for decades.
Years. His parents, he's
grew up in the Civil War, right in Arkansas, the middle of integration.
He's been doing this his whole life.
For years. Well, let me tell you something, ma'am. I just go and say anything I want to say. I think you made a great choice.
Thank you.
Even though he found you on the internet. Sometimes you can find a bad deal on that internet. But
I did that before him.
See what I'm talking about? So you made a good choice.
Yes.
And I'm going to just ask, are you all close to formalizing this relationship?
Yes, we have been. Her son's about out of high school, and that's something we've already. Yeah, it's important to me. It's important to my faith. So
yeah, I didn't want to use the word M.
Offend somebody?
That's right.
No, she just wants to make sure I can afford a big enough ring. That's the.
Don't even give him that impression.
Well, ma'am, don't worry about the ring. Don't worry about the ring. You worry about what he has in the bank. See, that's what you want. You need some money. Big rings will cause a marriage to fall within 6 months if you can't go and eat nothing but a hamburger when you go out
Oh,
to
I
dinner.
know. Yeah,
So-
I get it.
So you have him
Sure.
to do what he's supposed to do, and I want to say thank you both for coming.
Mhm.
And when you get back in Jackson, Mississippi, and start talking to these black college students at Jackson State University, Tougaloo, and the other colleges in this area, I want you all to come back
Absolutely.
on this show.
We'd be honored.
I appreciate you coming today.
Thank you very
And I
much.
also want to thank a guy named Mr. McBride.
Oh, Ernest McBride?
Yeah, you know Ernest McBride?
That warhorse, I know who he is.
He told me about you. He told me about you all. Now, a lot of people don't know Ernest McBride is a great writer. He writes for the Jackson Advocate. The man has a great education went to them old white schools up there in California. He doesn't like to talk about it. Smart as a son of a gun. He knows more about black history than the average black history professor.
I learned that yesterday at the Civil Rights Museum with him.
You did?
I didn't need a museum or the earphones. I had Ernest going with me.
That's exactly right. So anytime you get a man like Ernest, and he acts like he is shy, but he's not. I invited him on the show, and he turned me down. But next time, I don't expect to be turned down when I give him another invitation.
I would expect not. I'll bring him if I have to.
Okay. All right, Mr. Producer? We're just going to say thank you for your work this evening. I want to thank you for allowing our guests to be free to talk. You didn't cut us off, and we didn't give our underwriters a chance to sell their goods and services. Now, why did you do that, Mr. Producer?
Because this is your show, Doctor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right, then, Mr. Producer, we're going to go on and just say thank you for your support. And we are going to say to the listeners and viewers, if you want to hear the real news from the Elder Henderson Real News Show, you call me at 601-201-1957, and I will tell you the non-radio and television version. I'm not going to tell you everything on these shows because some of you already are saying, I can't take what this man is saying. It's getting too strong for me. But I'll give you the real news, and you can start changing your life, your status, your community, and your family in 30, 60, or 90 days. Call me now, 601-201-1957. I always say, organize, don't criticize. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.